Good morning, Journey. Happy Sabbath. Welcome back to another edition of Sabbath School with me, Pastor Adam, and with Jesus, our pastoral intern over at Journey. And we are making our way through the first quarter of Sabbath School lessons, where we have been in the book of Isaiah. And today we are kind of hanging out in the 40th chapter of Isaiah. So for those of you, if you've gotten a chance to check out your Sabbath School lesson, great. If not, it's totally okay. Our theme for today is going to be comfort. And like I said, our main text will be Isaiah 40. So let me go ahead and read that text for us real quick, and then we'll launch into our conversation. So starting in 40 verse 1. Comfort, O comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and cry to her that she has served her term, that her penalty is paid, that she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins. A voice cries out, in the wilderness prepare the way of the Lord, and make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Every valley shall be lifted up, and every mountain and hill be made low. The uneven ground shall become level, and the rough places a plain. Then the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all people shall see it together, for the mouth of the Lord is spoken. A voice says, cry out, and I say, what shall I cry? All people are grass, their constancy is like the flower of the field. The grass withers, the flower fades when the breath of the Lord blows upon it. Surely the people are grass. The grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of our God will stand forever. Get you up to a high mountain, O Zion, herald of good tidings. Lift up your voice with strength, O Jerusalem, herald of good tidings. Lift it up, do not fear. Say to the cities of Judah, here is your God. See, the Lord God comes with might, and his arm rules for him. His reward is with him, and his recompense before him. He will feed his flock like a shepherd. He will gather the lambs in his arms and carry them in his bosom, and gently lead the mother sheep. Who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand, and marked off the heavens with a span, and closed the dust of the earth in a measure, and weighed the mountains in scales and the hills in a balance? Who has directed the Spirit of the Lord, or as his counselor has instructed him? Whom did he consult for his enlightenment, and who taught him the path of justice? Who taught him knowledge and showed him the way of understanding? Even the nations are like a drop from a bucket, and are accounted as dust on the scales. See, he takes up the isles like fine dust. Lebanon would not provide fuel enough, nor are its animals enough for a burnt offering. All the nations are as nothing before him. They are accounted by him as less than nothing in emptiness. To whom then will you liken God, or what likeness compare with him? An idol? A workman casts it, and a goldsmith overlays it with gold, and casts it for silver for chains. As a gift one chooses mulberry wood, wood that will not rot, then seeks out a skilled artisan to set up an image that will not topple. Have you not known? Have you not heard? Has it not been told to you from the beginning? Have you not understood from the foundations of the earth? It is he who sits above the circle of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain, and spreads them like a tent to live in, who brings princes to naught, and makes the rulers of the earth as nothing. Scarcely are they planted, scarcely sown, scarcely has their stem taken root in the earth, when he blows upon them and they wither, and the tempest carries them off like stubble. To whom then will you compare me, or who is my equal, says the Holy One? Lift up your eyes on high and see, who created these? He who brings out their hosts and numbers them, calling them all by name. Because he is great in strength, mighty in power, not one is missing. Why do you say, O Jacob, and speak, O Israel, my way is hidden from the Lord, and my right is disregarded by my God? Have you not known? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He does not faint or grow weary. His understanding is unsearchable. He gives power to the faint and strengthens the powerless. Even youths will faint and be weary, and the young will be exhausted. But those who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. So as you can see, there's a lot going on in this chapter of Isaiah. And as the Sabbath School lesson goes, because remember earlier in the quarter, as we were talking in our Sabbath School lesson, we were talking about the idea of Assyria and the Assyrian exile, and Judah facing down Assyria after the northern tribes of Israel had been taken away into exile to never be seen again. But then the Sabbath School lesson talks about the abrupt shift that at a certain point in Isaiah, I think it's in the 30s, at a certain point in Isaiah, like Assyria is really no longer mentioned, right? And it almost like shifts the focus from Assyria to Babylon. Now, which happens quite a bit later chronologically. Um, and so when we talk about Isaiah 40, we understand Isaiah 40 through the context of the Babylonian exile, not the Assyrian exile, and perhaps nearing the end of the Babylonian exile. And Jesus, what do you think the biggest theme from this chapter is?
Um, well, I think that we can find that within literally the first verse. Comfort my people, says your God. And so I really like that because I mean, first of all, right, it starts with comfort twice, but then it says your God, and I like that right off the bat because as the chapter goes on, a bunch of questions start to be risen up. Like, right, what shall I cry? With whom then will you compare God? Do you not know? Have you not heard? To whom will you compare me? Why do you complain? Do you not know? Have you not heard? So it's this like continual like reminder to Israel, like, yo, do you not remember? Like, this is God.
Mm,
He is here to comfort you. It says no nation, no idol, nothing compares to God, and so I think like that is the central theme. This reminder that there, sure, there's sure there's power within kingdoms, power within nations, and all that, but at the end of the day, it's God's power, which
mm,
is mercy and grace that will last forever. And ultimately those things will bring comfort, not the idols, not the nations. And I think that's one of the things that the lesson is calling us to reflect on is God's comfort.
mm. And I do love that refrain too, where it talks about like, have you not known, have you not heard? Like, kind of being like, hey, I like how you said it,
Mm-hmm.
remember what God has done for you, remember what God is doing for you, and then you can trust what God will do for you.
Yeah.
um
and
and yeah, this is
yeah,
timely too, huh?
and I think what I like so much about this one, it's not a like, this is over, it's done, it's over. It's remember so you can continue to push through.
Mm,
And I think that's why it ends the way it ends, right? Talking about God giving strength so that we can continue to go. And so and so I don't know, right? I guess that is that what comfort is that, is it just a seldom reminder that like it's going to be okay, but I need you to keep pushing?
mm. Well, that's a good place to start. Yeah, what does comfort mean to you? Maybe apart from the text, maybe just in your own experience, what does comfort mean to you?
So I really want to answer that, but I feel like uh, I guess I'll be answering it almost completely already. So um, I jumped to the book of Revelation when the scroll can be opened and John is crying out, and it's like, yo, who can open this scroll, right? And then the Lamb that is worthy can open it. As I was reading one of my books called Comfort and Protest by Alan A. Bozak, he touches on he kind of explains into detail why the lamb is actually worthy, and I've never heard it in the way
Mm,
he explains it. And it sounds, it honestly, that to me brings so much comfort, that idea of why the lamb is worthy. And so he says that um first of all, the lamb is worthy because its power is not the same power that Caesar has.
mm,
Caesar's power, Rome's power, is an oppressive power to rule, while the lamb's power is a selfless other otherness to love. It's just self outpouring.
right.
But then he says that, you're right. We think of the lamb, we think of a gentle lamb, right, that was slain. But the way he puts it, he says, no, this is not a gentle lamb. This is a bellwether. I don't even know. I never knew what a bellwether was before reading that.
Mm,
Turns out a bellwether is usually a lamb sometimes even a ram that has a bell around their neck, and they are the first to lead the flock. They are the first to go up the mountain and the first to come down the mountain.
Mm.
And so the lamb that is worthy has gone before us and is after us too. So it's like he is leading his people. And the thing about the lamb that was slain is that although it is slain, it still stands. And because it is slain, it's still standing, it continues to suffer our present suffering and our present oppression. And
Mm.
so when I read it like that, I was like, yo, no, this is comforting for sure. Like to know that Christ is the lamb that was slain. And although God was slain, God still stands. That's kind of where I'm at right now with that idea of comfort.
Which is all well and good, and I think that's really good stuff. Like honestly, like theologically, it's like chef's kiss, amazing, fantastic, yeah. But
Yeah.
also, could you also say it's a little abstract and a little cerebral, though?
Yeah. And I think that's yeah.
So let's just say on a
Yeah.
gut level, man, on a gut level, like I'm not talking Jesus the theologian, I'm not talking Jesus the pastoral intern, I'm talking Jesus, like child of God, Jesus, son and uncle and brother and friend and boyfriend, like Jesus, like
Yeah.
when do you feel comfort, like in your own experience? Because remember, a lot of people we talk to, they can't make that connect and that leap to that feeling based on those abstract concepts, right? So what does comfort, like at the end of the day, like say that you need comfort, right?
Yeah.
You've had a rough week, you've had a rough time, everything's just gone wrong. Maybe it's just dreary and drizzling outside, like the whole world seems it's like gone bonkers. What brings you comfort? And what does that feel like?
I'll tell you, I'll be honest, it's just it's it's when you're alone, right? And you had that horrible week, that horrible day, and at least for me, you lied to yourself and you're like, I can get through this, I can get through this, I can get through this. But when it's all said and done and it's just you and your thoughts, comfort looks like, you know what, God, I can't. And then the waterworks, right? You're just crying and you're just crying until it stops. And you're like, why did it stop? And it's because somewhere deep down there is a God that is working in the midst of whatever you're going through. And it's hard to explain, but sometimes comfort will come through that right, those just being alone, or
Mm.
sometimes it will come through I can't do this alone, let me call my girlfriend, and then my girlfriend will say something that I know is of the spirit, right? Or sometimes it's just me reminding myself like, hey, like it's okay, but yeah, I guess that's the more practical sense of looking at it. The
I
more
think that's something we always have to keep in mind, right? Like, because we can sometimes, especially because, well, I find it so fascinating, right? And like all that revelation stuff, I'm like, yes, yes, yeah, and I'm already like, this is a much better way of thinking of revelation, especially being more true to its original context and the persecution. But then, like, I guess the kind of like part of that pastoral response, then though, because there's the theologian and then there's the pastor, and I don't think that they necessarily have to be mutually exclusive, but there is a difference where it's like this is really cool on an abstract level, but then what does this mean to our members who are in the pews and are just dealing with just like normal stuff, right? And I mean what all of us are dealing with right now, right? With quarantine, with pandemic, with all of the political nonsense that's been going on, with all the economical nonsense that's been going on, all the uncertainty, all the unpredictability. And I like how you said it, man, with the waterworks and stuff, because I wonder if part of that is like it's like the space to feel what you need to feel.
Mhm.
Because all too often, I think with the Christian response and the Adventist response, we're always like told, oh, well, because we have this hope and because of all this, we're not almost allowed to feel things. Like we can't just be
Yeah.
like, oh man, this is really bad. Or, oh man, I feel horrible. Because then it's like, oh, well, where's your faith? Right?
Yeah.
But I like to hear where because look, Isaiah wouldn't have to say comfort to the people if the people were just if it was just a mental exercise for them, if it was just an abstract thing.
Yeah.
They are not in their home, and honestly, there are people at that point in the Babylonian exile who have never seen their homeland,
Mm,
who have no memory of it. Right? There are
mm,
people who left and are dead now and will never come back.
mm.
And so I really like how you kind of painted that picture, right? Like it reminds me like when my first serious relationship ended and I was devastated. I just cried and I cried so much. Like I remember lying face down in my bed and just, soaking the bed, right? With my tears. Um, and I'll tell you exactly for me, like what comfort feels like was that hand that rested on my shoulder
Mm.
when my sister's boyfriend came in and just sat with me
Yeah.
and put a hand on my shoulder and just let me cry, let me get it out until you're right, until that it stops. You kind of like, you know, take that check. Um, and yeah, it's interesting, right? Because it doesn't the problem isn't necessarily gone, right? And I like how you said that earlier. The comfort doesn't necessarily mean that you're fully on the other side of it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's less about even the circumstances and more about a change in the circumstances and more of a change in you.
And yeah, and I think, right, I like how you said that. Sometimes the problem isn't God, because I don't see God being the problem. It's just that physical separation between humanity and God.
Mm,
Right? And I think that's really like what that comfort is supposed to be. Comfort is supposed to be that bridge of physical separation, because we can connect with God spiritually, but at least for me, a lot of the times, it's been like, yo, God, why can't you just be here right now?
yeah.
Like tangibly be here. Like, and it's like that is so frustrating, because it's not that God can't. It's just that it's not, what God has planned at the very moment.
Right.
And so comfort is that bridge that allows us to realize that, like, yo, we long for God and to be in God's presence. But that's as far as I go. I don't know what else to say
Well,
to
it's
that
it's
part.
funny. It's funny because I actually like that. Like, because I meant to say that comfort doesn't mean the problem is gone. Um, but like I like it both ways. Like the problem isn't God, right? More often than not, because more often than not, a lot of what we go through is what we as humanity have brought upon ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
and part of it is entropy and chaos, which we can't deny the existence of. Um, but so I like the fact of first off saying, you know what, it's not God. And in fact, what God brings is God brings solutions and answers, or at least a way to move forward. But also, what I was saying is like, just because we are feeling the comfort doesn't necessarily mean the problem is gone. Like, it's still there sometimes. And so that's when we have to like, what we have to do is in the process, like, okay, and maybe comfort, yeah, like you were saying earlier, comfort's just, okay, now we can move forward.
Yeah.
And we can move forward and we can think a little clearer. We can feel a little bit better about where we are. Maybe part of it is maybe the problem isn't gone, but we can see the end on the horizon. Like for the people of Israel, when they're being told about Babylon and stuff, like it's not like it happened like right that second, right? It
Yeah.
took time for all that to happen.
Yeah.
But they're looking forward to it now with some anticipation and some excitement. Um, honestly, like I think there's some really clear, tangible parallels between their context and ours right now. Right, dealing with a
Mm-hmm.
pandemic and dealing with what we're dealing with this. Like for a lot of us, um, at certain points, it just felt like, man, is this ever going to end?
Right.
People not wearing their masks, people not distancing, numbers going up, people still trying to hold indoor church services when they shouldn't be, people doing all sorts of wacky stuff, you know, because they don't believe it's real and all sorts of nonsense. And so there are certain times where we're like, and then some of us who've been like trying to be really good about quarantining and really good about like not doing those things look around and are like, are we wrong? You know, like almost being in like this perpetual state of being gaslit. So maybe like the people in Israel in that time being like, hey guys, God will keep God's promises. Like this won't be forever. And
Right.
like I could just see someone like, well, tell that to my grandpa. He died before this ever, he died just last week, and now he'll never know. And people are
Right.
like, oh, we're gonna be in Babylon
Yeah.
forever. You know.
And there's and it's true. Like what you just said is true. Like for real. Like, nah, tell that to my grandpa. Like, people have I guess the right to be in those feelings and emotions because it is true. And I think of song and worship, like that's one way that I know that I find comfort because it is a reminder and to me at least. And so I think of slavery here in our country, right?
Mm.
That was something that African Americans turned to time and time again, was song and worship, song and worship. And it's the same thing. It's like, well, tell that to my grandpa that passed away, that was hung or something, or so it's like, yeah, that's what I'm thinking about. And it's like, how do you find comfort in like song and worship, and how does that help you to keep moving forward even under such harsh conditions, because they are harsh conditions that people have to gone through history time and time again. And even now, right? Like, I know, at least in my family, I've been fortunate enough that no one has been hugely impacted by COVID, but other people have lost family members. And so it's like, I guess on that level, how does the word of God, how is God even supposed to comfort that?
I think we have to be careful to start with. You bring up some really powerful um, examples. Uh, we have to be careful when we talk about how we're moving forward, and be careful not to over spiritualize certain parts of it. And I know that might sound weird, but what I mean is, like, for example, at church, when you have that member that goes, God helped me find my car keys this morning, so I want to give a praise during prayer time for God helping me find my keys.
Mm-hmm.
That comes off as incredibly callous to somebody who's been praying for a family member who's dying of cancer and who doesn't get saved or doesn't get healed. So, okay, so God can help people find car keys, but God can't cure my family member of cancer. And so when we talk about like suffering and we talk about these traumatic, incredibly traumatic events,
Mm-hmm.
we have to be careful. God does not desire for death, and God is anti-death, to be honest. Like, and that's why our eschatological rhetoric is so important. That death does not have the final say, but we have to be mindful that when we talk about God's deliverance and we talk about like being on the other side of it, we have to mourn for those who are no longer here and for those who did not get to see this. And I think part of the processing, and a healthy part of the processing, is grief, is anger, is all these things. And I believe God welcomes all of it. I wonder if sometimes we sing our songs of worship not just in praise, but also in protest. That we sing to God and we say, God, I know who you are and who you told me you are, and I don't see it right now.
Yeah.
And so I need to know what's going on, or at least to some degree, or I need some way to move forward. Because right now things aren't looking good. And I guess part of my thing is like, and this kind of stems back to some of what we were talking about earlier, is that there really needs to be more vulnerability and the room for vulnerability in our communities of faith.
Yeah,
People need to know that they are safe with God to exhibit and to share and to, you know, kind of let go powerful emotions like that, and in God's direction,
yeah,
you know. And I think that's why I love Silent Sabbath so much. With
yeah,
the whole Easter weekend thing, is not only am I an emo kid at heart, but like there's this like between Good Friday and Easter Sunday, it's a really important time because
mhm,
we like to skip, right? We like to go to Good Friday and talk about the suffering of Christ on the cross, and it's pretty horrific, right? And you know, we talk about human suffering, and human suffering is horrific, but we want to gloss over to the end. We want to gloss over to the happy ending. We want to go, everything's okay, everyone's okay. Sorrow and death and pain are no more, for the first things that pass away. Every tear is dried. We want to get to there. But remember, the whole point of wiping the tears away is God can't wipe away a tear that hasn't been cried.
yeah,
And so we, to some degree, we have to be in this, and we have to recognize that God is in this too.
yeah.
And when we sit on Silent Sabbath as we wait for Jesus to come back and kind of maybe like reflect with it the depths of human sorrow and human experience and suffering. Because remember, the disciples didn't have Easter Sunday waiting for
Mm,
them.
mm.
That was a surprise. Um, they were sitting there on the day after Good Friday, wondering what to do next, how to put their lives back together, losing, in their opinion, everything. Um,
So yeah, so I'm gonna bring up a couple points and then maybe you can dissect them. The first point being is that comfort comes in different dimensions.
mm,
Um, so I think of Exodus chapter 14. This is where like the Israelites are they had recently just got freed, and they're like starting to like question God already, like, yo, God, why did you take us out of here, this and that.
only to die in the wilderness. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But God's response is so funny to Moses. He's like, why are you crying out to me? Just move forward. Like that's like, so sometimes it's a very direct, like, let's get over it. Come on, I'm here. Let's go. Other times it's more of I think of right Jesus when uh Lazarus dies.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a lot more like, yo, I'm gonna cry with you, you know? And so I'll bring up that point. Again, I'll say comfort has many different dimensions. And the second point I'll bring up is it safe to say God is also in distress and need of comfort?
Mm.
And God's comfort will come when we're all finally together. I don't know.
I like that a lot. Um, First off, I like the multidimensionality because look, human life is complicated, and human beings are complex and complicated, and life is complex and complicated. It's multidimensional. People are multidimensional, as Shrek famously says. They're, you know, like ogres. People are like onions, right? There's layers and there's nuances and there's all sorts of things going on. And I think that like concepts like comfort are multidimensional too. And there's a time for certain types of comfort. Sometimes the comfort comes in moving forward and taking the next step and just going, right? But sometimes you have to sit in it for a minute. And I think God is in both of those places.
Mm-hmm.
That God is helping us to move forward. Can these dry bones live? Breathe life in them, speak life into them. And then sometimes God's like, nah, we need to take a moment here,
Mm-hmm.
pause and be still. Like for example, Elijah in the lowest point in Elijah's
Mm-hmm.
ministry, if not life,
Mm-hmm.
when he's contemplating ending it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, God comes in and isn't in the huge displays
Yeah. Yeah.
and isn't in the moving forward. God just sits there and just kind of like is reflecting with him and is like, why are you here?
Yeah.
And so there's, I think you're right, there is a multidimensionality to comfort. And that's why I think in the church, that's why sometimes it's hard, because we're like, well, what type do we need? For example, I think that where we are right now as a church is we've been in the let's sit for a minute and let's take this in, let's process, let's
Hmm.
grieve, let's, and there's space for that here in this pandemic. Now though, with the vaccines rolling out and with things, and not saying we're necessarily putting our faith in politicians or vaccines or any of that stuff, what we're doing is we're putting our faith in the community and in God, and God working through the community, and we're saying, okay, now we see a way forward, now let's move, you know
Mm.
which is why I would say, if any of you can get the vaccine right now, go get the vaccine, please. Like, I've gotten the first dose, gonna get the second one soon. Everything's fine. No microchips, no conspiracy theories. No, it's good. Please take it. So yeah, so the multidimensionality of comfort. And I think that we're in a place where, and it's interesting, we want to move forward, but at the same time, we also want to be mindful of what's been lost and who's been lost.
Mm.
And still be able to have those moments along the way where we take the moments for that,
Hmm.
and then the second part, I actually really love that idea. All too often I think that we get nervous when we talk about God and what God
Mm.
can and can't do, especially with classical definitions of omnipotence and omniscience, all powerful and all knowing, like God's, all knowing and all powerful. So, and I think that what's funny is that we oftentimes will put more in there than is necessary. It's like we scoop like extra things in there while we're at it, like a kid making a sundae, right? And then we put all this extra stuff in, and then it all gets muddled together, and then it's hard to like pull out then what's not actually supposed to be there in our
Hmm.
theology. Can't believe we just compared theology to a Sunday, but here we are. Um,
Hmm.
and I like how you said that. Is it possible that God not only gives comfort, but needs comfort?
Mm.
And I mean, I think that the clearest example we have of this is Christ in Gethsemane.
Yeah.
There was God needing comfort.
Mm. Mm.
And when God turned to humanity for comfort, where were they?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
garden, in the cool of the evening breeze, and God is walking around and can't find the people that God has created. And God
Yeah.
cries out to them.
Yeah.
Perhaps God needed comfort. And where were they? So maybe you're right. Maybe God does need comfort. Maybe I'm thank God for the Godhead, because that helps, because human beings are real unreliable when it comes to that. But maybe that's what that, like, the whole parousia and our eschatological expression. I know I use fancy words, but like the imminent soon coming of Christ, right? Perhaps what that
Yeah.
is that is like that is the fullness of God's comfort, because now all of the sheep are back. Everyone's back where they belong. Everyone is found. Everyone is safe. Everyone is fully with God forever. So
Yeah.
maybe God can't truly find comfort until then.
Yeah, and what I like what you said. So I'm gonna backtrack a little bit, and I like the example you said with Elijah, and God is like, "What are you doing here?" And I think the most important thing to notice is not so much Elijah, "What are you doing here?" It's Elijah, "I'm here with you at your lowest." And then so I think that's right. Is that even in right? And we've heard this time and time again. I just sounds repetitive, but I think it is beautiful to think that in our need of comfort, like God will find you. And then going back to the example of Jesus in the garden, and turning to humanity, and even um, asking his disciples, like, yo, can you stay up with me, this and that. And ultimately, yeah, humanity, quote unquote, failed Jesus at that moment. But I think even Jesus had to be reminded, do you not know? Like, did you not hear? Did you not remember? Like, your Father God is here at your lowest. And I think tying in right Isaiah 40 to what was happening with Jesus, like, do you not know Jesus? Do you not know that I can only bring comfort?
Right. I was just also thinking about like a crazy parallel because I was just putting the two stories side by side, right? We have the Garden of Eden and the Garden of Gethsemane. And in both cases, we have God reaching out for humanity
Yeah.
and humanity falling short. And in both cases, despite the fact that humanity has fallen short, God is still God and God still brings grace. In the Garden of Eden, the animals died to make clothes for the human beings. The Garden of Gethsemane, the Son of God is led away to die for the sins of humanity. And so it's like this beautiful, like kind of like, and I like how you said that, where God, to some degree, God almost has to find the answer within God's self.
Yeah.
Because humanity at this point where we're at, humanity will always fall short. But and that maybe might actually be a comforting thing for us because maybe God isn't expecting us to find our own comfort.
Mm-hmm.
That God isn't expecting us to find all the answers by ourselves. God gives us the room to try, but ultimately it's God's grace that has to take us the rest of the way. And ultimately, that to get to that final comfort, or big letter C comfort, to just finally get to that that moment, it has to be God.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. And so maybe that's what God is saying here in Isaiah 40, when God's making the whole point of saying, well, this is who I am. Have you not heard? Have you not seen? And I love how God almost like gives God's credentials, right? Where it's
Yeah.
who has measured the waters and who's enclosed the earth and who's done all these things. Very similar, actually, to the end of Job, when Job is looking for answers and God just tells Job who God is.
Mm.
And maybe there is an answer in that, even if it's not necessarily the answer we were looking for.
Yeah.
We want to know why.
Mm.
And God goes, perhaps it's not a question of why. Perhaps it's a question of who.
Mm-hmm.
I am here and I am here for you and I will be here for you and everything's going to be okay in the end.
Mm-hmm.
Like we as a church, we can't tell you why suffering exists. We can't tell you how this pandemic really started. We can't tell you a lot of this, but what we can do is we can be a way to help with the suffering. We can be a means to help. And we can be a means of bringing comfort to people that need it. Right?
Yeah. And and um and I don't think we have a choice. Like, I think that's what we are called to do. Um and so in one of my books that I was reading, it's called Mañana by Justo L. Gonzalez, and he tells a story and he gives an example. He says, if in the future if I truly believe that Japan is where I want to live in the future, because it has the most beautiful art, it has the most advanced technology, it has, like, it's just so, like, the nature, everything, like, I want to live in Japan. He says, then I should start learning Japanese now. Right? But
mm,
instead, what if I got my retirement home somewhere in Georgia or somewhere in Florida, and I did all these things. I invested in this or did this and that, and everyone's bothered to learn Japanese. Then, like, there is no hope for Japan, right? And so what he's trying to say is he's comparing it to the reign of God, and ultimately he says the reign of God is love. Like, that's what it is.
mm,
And if we want to, if we're longing for God's kingdom, then we should be practicing the reign of God now,
mm.
or in his example, practicing Japanese.
I
And
love
how
that.
do we do that, right? We're practicing love. We're practicing giving comfort to others. We're giving hope. We're being there for the oppressed, the marginalized. So all this stuff that we've talked about time and time again, it still continues to be our calling. And so we're taking it back to the garden. God had to comfort God's self for what God was about to do.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah,
to give Jesus what Jesus needed to get to where Jesus needed to be. Kind of like at the end of Isaiah 40, where it talks about like giving us what we need to keep moving.
yeah, yeah. That's where I'll stop right there.
It's good. It's good. So maybe to like summarize, to recap, comfort is a multidimensional concept. Comfort is a concept that is part of our existence and perhaps also part of God's existence. And as we move forward, there's times where we should sit and reflect and process and mourn. And there are times where we need to move forward. And perhaps part of the trick of this life and part of being led by the Spirit is knowing when to do which,
Mm,
right? And so, overall, Journey, we want you to take comfort in our message today, in the message of Isaiah today. We want you to take comfort, especially not only for their context, but for our context here today, that we do see a light at the end of this. It doesn't mean we neglect and forget what's happened, and it doesn't mean we forget about those who have passed in the process of this. We carry that with us. But with God and with God's comfort, we can move forward into that future that God is calling us to. And get your vaccines. Anything else you want to add, Jesus?
yeah, I'm good. I think I said everything.
All right, Journey, thank you so much for joining us this morning for Sabbath School. We hope that you found this to be engaging and thought-provoking. And if you want to share anything, if you want to have any questions or comments, or if you want prayer or Bible studies, make sure to fill out the jot form that's going to be in the description of this video. And if you like it, please subscribe to the channel. Even if you're not part of our church and you've been watching this, if you like it, subscribe, share it with people, and let other people know what we're doing here. And thank you guys so much. Also, if you want to give, remember you can go to journeysca.org, and we're going to be having a brand new, fresh website soon. So look forward to that. And then you'll be able to find a way to give on there. There'll be a place to click and you can give, or you can text Journey SCA Give to 77977. And the wonderful people at PushPay can help you along the rest of the way with that. And yeah, guys, let's have a word of prayer and then we'll head out. Father in heaven, Lord, thank you so much for your comfort. Thank you for your words of the past, your actions in the present, and the hope you give us for the future. And God, as we move forward into this future, may we move forward with the comfort that only you can provide. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, I pray. All right, Journey, remember that God loves you very much. Remember to love each other. And remember that we at Journey SCA love you, and no distance can change that. See you guys later.